The first thing you notice about working nights at an airport isn't the silence. It's how loud everything feels when it shouldn't be. Engines hum somewhere in the distance, even when no planes are scheduled. Conveyor belts click on and off like they're breathing. Fluorescent lights flicker overhead, buzzing with a tired kind of energy that never fully dies. It's a place built for constant motion, forced into stillness, and it doesn't handle that transition well. I learned that on my first night. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been sleeping on my brother's couch in Phoenix, scrolling through job listings at 3 a.m. because insomnia had become my only routine. I wasn't broke yet, but I was close enough to see it coming. Rent overdue, credit maxed, the kind of slow collapse you don't notice until everything's already gone. That's when I found the listing. Night Operations Assistant, Regional Airport. $22 an hour, minimal experience required. Must follow instructions exactly. That last line stuck with me. Not attention to detail, not team player, just follow instructions exactly. I applied anyway. 2 days later, I got a call. The man on the other end introduced himself as Mr. Halverson. His voice was calm, flat, the kind of voice that didn't waste time on unnecessary emotion. He didn't ask many questions, just confirmed my name, my availability, and whether I was comfortable working alone overnight. Completely alone? I asked. A pause. Mostly, he said. You'll have a supervisor on call, but you won't see many people between 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. That should have been a red flag. Instead, I said yes. By the end of the week, I was standing outside Black Ridge Regional Airport with a duffel bag, a cheap jacket, and just under $600 left in my account. The building looked normal enough during the day. Small terminal, a parking lot that stretched farther than it needed to. But at night, under those dim perimeter lights, it felt wrong. Too open, too exposed. Like the darkness wasn't just around the airport, it was watching it. I told myself that was just nerves. Inside, the terminal was mostly empty. A janitor pushed a cart slowly across the tile floor, not looking at me as I walked in. The overhead speakers crackled with a distorted announcement that cut off halfway through, leaving behind a hollow echo. Gate A2 flickered on and off. There were no flights listed on the board. First night? I turned. The man walking toward me was tall, thin, probably in his late 50s, gray hair, neatly combed. His uniform was pressed too perfectly for a night shift. Yeah, I said. You, Mr. Halverson? He nodded once. You're early. That's good. His eyes moved over me quickly, like he was checking for something specific. Come with me. He didn't wait to see if I followed. We walked past the check-in counters, down a narrow hallway marked Authorized Personnel Only. The lights flickered more the farther we went, until the hum became almost unbearable. At the end of the hall was a door. No label, no window, just a keypad and chipped gray paint. He punched in a code without looking. The door clicked open. Operations room, he said. Inside, it was smaller than I expected. A desk, 2 monitors, a radio unit, a wall clock that ticked just a little too loudly, and a camera feed. Dozens of them. Every angle of the airport, gates, runways, baggage claim, even the parking lot. All displayed in grainy black and white. Except one, camera 12. It showed the far end of runway B, and it was completely black. Broken? I asked. Halverson didn't look at the screen. No, he said, just limited. That didn't make sense. Before I could ask, he reached into a drawer and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. Read this carefully, he said. Memorize it if you can. I took it. At the top, in plain text, were the words, Night Shift Rules, Black Ridge Regional Airport. My stomach tightened. There were 8 of them. He didn't let me read them yet. Instead, he leaned slightly closer. I'm going to tell you something once, he said, and I need you to understand it. His voice hadn't changed, but something underneath it had. Wait. If you follow these rules exactly, you will finish your shift. If you don't, he paused. For the first time, he looked directly into my eyes. You won't. I felt a dry laugh rise in my throat, but it died before it reached my mouth. Is this some kind of joke? I asked. No. He stepped back. Your shift starts at 11. You monitor the cameras, log any unusual activity. Do not leave this room unless required by the rules. The rules require me to leave? Sometimes. That didn't help. I looked down at the paper again, finally starting to read. Rule 1. Do not acknowledge any aircraft that appears on runway B between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Rule 2. If you hear your name called over the intercom after midnight, do not respond. Rule 3. If gate A2 lights turn off completely, look away from the monitors for exactly 10 seconds. Rule 4. Never make eye contact with passengers who are not listed on the flight schedule. Rule 5. If camera 12 turns on, leave the operations room immediately and lock the door behind you. Rule 6. If a plane lands without clearance, do not report it. Rule 7. If you see someone standing on the runway, close your eyes and count to 30. Rule 8. If the radio asks you a question, do not answer unless you are certain who is speaking. I read them twice, then a third time. Each one felt more absurd than the last. This is insane, I said. Halverson nodded slightly. Most people say that. Most people? They don't last long. A silence stretched between us. The clock ticked. 11 p.m. My shift had officially started. He walked toward the door, then stopped. One more thing, he said, without turning around. The cameras don't always show you everything. And then he left. The door shut behind him with a heavy click. I was alone. Just me, the monitors, and the rules. For a while, nothing happened. The airport stayed quiet, still, normal. And that was the worst part, because it meant I had time to think. About the rules, about the tone in Halverson's voice, about the way camera 12 wasn't broken, just limited. Around 11:47 p.m., I heard the first sound that didn't belong. A distant announcement, crackling through the intercom, distorted, unclear. But underneath the static, I could have sworn I heard my name. I froze. Rule 2. Do not respond. The voice came again, clearer this time, closer, saying my name like it knew me, like it had been waiting. I stared at the radio, then at the door, then back at the monitors. Everything looked normal. Everything felt wrong. And that's when camera 12 flickered, just for a second. Just enough to show that it wasn't empty. Something was standing on runway B, watching the terminal, watching me. I didn't move, not at first. My eyes stayed locked on camera 12, even after it went black again. Like my brain was trying to replay what I'd just seen, and failing to decide if it had actually happened. Something had been there. I was sure of it. Not static. A shape. Tall. Upright. Standing in the middle of runway B like it belonged there. Watching. A sharp burst of static cracked through the room. I flinched. The radio. It lit up for a second, then went quiet again. No voice. Just that same low hum that seemed to sit underneath everything in the airport, like it was part of the building itself. I exhaled slowly, trying to steady my breathing. Okay, I muttered. You're just tired. That was the logical explanation. Long day, new job, strange environment, my brain filling in gaps with things that weren't real. Except the rules. People don't write rules like that for no reason. I looked down at the paper again, smoothing it out against the desk like that would make it easier to understand. Rule 2. If you hear your name called over the intercom after midnight, do not respond. I checked the clock. 11:52 p.m. Not midnight yet. So technically, that wasn't the rule. A small, dangerous part of my brain latched onto that immediately. Does that mean it's safe? I whispered. The question hung in the air, unanswered. The intercom crackled again, louder this time, closer. Ache. The first part of my name got swallowed in static, but the rest came through clearly enough to send a chill down my spine. Jake, I swallowed. That's not possible, I said under my breath. They didn't have my name on file anywhere outside of HR. There was no reason for an announcement to be calling me specifically. Unless it wasn't an announcement. The speakers popped again. Jake, report to Gate A2. My eyes snapped to the monitors. Gate A2. The lights were still on, flickering slightly, but on. There was no one there. No passengers, no staff. Just empty rows of seats under harsh fluorescent light. Rule 3. If Gate A2 lights turn off completely, look away from the monitors for exactly 10 seconds. They weren't off. Not yet. Jake, Gate A2. The voice sounded clearer now. Less distorted. More natural. Like a real person speaking into a microphone somewhere in the building. I felt my body lean forward slightly before I caught myself. No, I said, louder this time. Nope. Rule 2 didn't technically apply yet, but something about the way that voice sounded. It wasn't right. Too aware. Like it knew I was listening. The intercom went silent. Just like that. The sudden absence of sound felt heavier than the noise itself. I stared at the monitors, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. For a few minutes, everything returned to that same unnatural stillness. The kind that makes you question if anything happened at all. I almost convinced myself it hadn't, until 12 a.m. The clock clicked over, and every monitor flickered at once. Not a glitch, not a quick blink. A full synchronized cut to black. My heart jumped into my throat. What the? The screens came back on a second later. Everything looked the same, except for one thing. Gate A2. The lights were off. Completely off. The area was swallowed in darkness, the camera struggling to pick up any detail beyond vague shapes. Rule 3. My stomach dropped. Look away from the monitors for exactly 10 seconds. Exactly, I repeated. I glanced at the clock. 12:07. Okay. I turned my chair slightly, angling my body away from the screens. Then I closed my eyes. 1, 2, 3. The silence pressed in immediately. Without the visual noise of the monitors, every sound felt amplified. The hum of the lights, the faint buzz of the radio. Something else too. A soft shuffling, like footsteps on tile, coming from somewhere beyond the operations room door. 6, 7. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to keep counting. 8, 9. The footsteps stopped, right outside the door. I held my breath. 10. I opened my eyes, slowly, carefully. The monitors came back into view. Gate A2 lights were on again. Bright, normal, empty. I let out a shaky breath. Okay, I whispered. Okay, you did it. Nothing had happened. Or at least, nothing visible. I turned back fully to the screens, scanning each feed one by one. Everything looked normal. Parking lot, empty. Baggage claim, still. Runway A, clear. Runway B, my chest tightened. Camera 12 was on. Not flickering, not glitching, fully on. And whatever had been standing there before was closer now. Much closer. It stood near the edge of the runway, just before the lights that marked the boundary between asphalt and open field. Tall. Too tall. Its proportions were wrong. Arms hanging too low. Head tilted slightly to one side. Even through the grainy black and white feed, I could tell it was facing the terminal. Facing me. I froze. Rule 1. Do not acknowledge any aircraft that appears on runway B between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. It wasn't 2 a.m., and that wasn't an aircraft. Different rule, I muttered. different situation. But that didn't make me feel any better. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, watching. The longer I stared, the more details seemed to shift, like my brain couldn't hold a consistent image of it. 1 second it looked thin, the next wider, like it wasn't fixed in place. A faint sound crept into the room, not from the radio, not from the intercom, from the speakers connected to the camera feed. A low dragging noise, like something being pulled slowly across concrete. I leaned in despite myself. "Don't," I whispered. "Don't engage." But I couldn't look away. The figure twitched, just slightly. Its head snapped a few degrees to the side, then back. Too fast, too sharp, like a broken animation. My pulse hammered in my ears. Okay, just log it," I said, grabbing the pen. My hand shook as I wrote. 12:04 a.m., camera 12 active. Unknown figure on runway B. No movement beyond minor. The pen stopped. Because the figure moved again. This time, it stepped forward. One long, unnatural stride. Then another. Each movement too smooth and too jerky at the same time. Like frames were missing between actions. It was coming closer. Closer to the terminal. Closer to me. "Rule 7, I said suddenly. "If you see someone standing on the runway, close your eyes and count to 30. My stomach dropped. That's not standing anymore. But it had been, seconds ago. Did that count? Did the rule still apply? The figure took another step. Then another. I didn't wait. I shut my eyes tight. 1, 2, 3. The dragging sound got louder. 4, 5. Something slammed against the outer wall of the terminal. Hard enough to make the floor vibrate slightly. 6, 7. A high-pitched screech tore through the speakers. 8, 9. The sound shifted into something else. Breathing. Heavy. Wet. Right outside. 10, 11. My hands clenched into fists. 12, 13. A voice whispered through the speakers, right next to my ear. "You're looking." My breath caught. "You're always looking." 14, 15. The voice sounded like mine. 16, 17. "Stop counting." 18, 19. "Open your eyes." 20. Something tapped on the door. 3 slow knocks. 21. Knock. 22. Knock. 23. Knock. 24. The handle rattled. 25. I pressed my back against the chair, forcing myself to keep going. 26. The breathing got louder. 27. 28. 29. Silence. 30. I opened my eyes. Everything was still. Camera 12 was black again. The door wasn't moving. The room was quiet. Too quiet. I sat there, barely breathing, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. For now. For a long time, I didn't trust the silence. That was the first real change. Before, the quiet felt empty, like nothing was happening. Now, it felt loaded, like something had just finished happening, and I barely made it through. I kept my eyes on camera 12 longer than I should have, waiting for it to flicker back on. It didn't. Just a black square in the corner of the monitor grid. Inactive. Or pretending to be. I forced myself to look away. "Log it," I muttered again, more firmly this time. Routine. That's what this job was supposed to be, right? Watch. Record. Don't think too much. I looked down at the notebook, reading what I'd written. 12:04 a.m. Camera 12 active. Unknown figure on runway B. Movement observed. Followed Rule 7. My handwriting looked worse than I remembered. Uneven. Pressed too hard into the paper, like I'd been trying to carve the words instead of write them. I added one more line. Audio anomalies present. Knocking at operations door. I hesitated, then underlined knocking twice. My eyes drifted back to the door. It looked normal, closed, locked, still. But I couldn't shake the memory of the handle rattling under something that didn't sound human. I checked the lock anyway. Still engaged. Good, I whispered. The words sounded weak in the room. The clock read 12:18 a.m. Too early. Way too early. I rubbed my face with both hands, trying to reset my focus. Just get through the shift, I said. Just get through. 8 hours. That's all it was supposed to be. 8 hours of watching empty screens. Except they weren't empty. Not really. I scanned through the cameras again, slower this time. Parking lot, still empty. Except, I leaned in slightly. There was a car now, parked near the far edge of the lot. That hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. A dark sedan, angled slightly off-center, like it hadn't been parked properly. No headlights, no interior lights, just sitting there. Okay, I said. That's normal. People leave cars overnight. That happened at airports. It made sense. Except, there were no incoming flights scheduled until morning. No outgoing flights had departed in the last 2 hours. No reason for someone to be here. I flipped to another camera angle, covering the same area. The car was still there. Same position. Same stillness. I leaned back in my chair. Log it. 12:20 a.m. Unknown vehicle in parking lot. No visible occupants. As I finished writing, something changed. Not on the parking lot feed. On gate A1. I frowned. That gate hadn't done anything all night. It wasn't even mentioned in the rules, which somehow made it worse. The camera flickered once, then steadied. And there, sitting in one of the chairs near the gate, was a person. I froze. They hadn't been there a second ago. I was sure of that. The seat had been empty. Now it wasn't. Okay, I whispered. Okay. The person sat perfectly still, head slightly bowed, hands resting on their knees, facing away from the camera. No luggage, no movement, no reason to be there. I glanced at the departures board on another monitor. Still empty. No flights, no passengers. Rule 4. Never make eye contact with passengers who are not listed on the flight schedule. My throat tightened. Not listed, I repeated. They're not listed, which meant that was one of them. A slow, creeping dread settled into my chest. Okay, I said quietly. Just don't engage. I shifted my focus to another screen, trying not to stare. But my eyes kept drifting back. The person didn't move, didn't breathe, didn't shift, just sat there, waiting. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time felt wrong now, stretched, uneven. At 12:27 a.m., the person moved. Not much, just enough. Their head tilted slightly to the side, then slowly began to turn toward the camera. No, I whispered immediately. No, no, no. I looked down at the desk, breaking eye contact with the monitor. Rule 4. Never make eye contact. I didn't know if that applied through a screen. I wasn't about to test it. I kept my gaze fixed on the notebook, staring at the ink like it could anchor me. A soft sound came through the speakers, fabric shifting, a chair creaking. Then, footsteps. Slow, measured, getting closer. I looked up before I could stop myself. Gate A1 was empty. The chair was vacant again. My stomach dropped. Where did? The footsteps didn't stop. They continued, but not from the speakers. From outside the room, in the hallway, moving toward the door. My chest tightened. No, no, no. I glanced at the monitors again, frantically scanning. Nothing. No one in the hallway camera. No movement anywhere near the operations room. but the footsteps were still coming. Closer, closer. Then, they stopped. Right outside. The same place the knocking had come from before. I didn't breathe, didn't move, didn't think. The handle didn't rattle this time. Instead, a shadow passed under the door. Slow, deliberate, like someone standing just inches away from the other side, watching, waiting. A soft voice came through, not from the intercom, not from the radio, from the other side of the door. "Hey," it said. "Normal, casual, human. I know you're in there." I swallowed hard. That wasn't in the rules. No rule about voices at the door. No instruction for this. "You don't have to ignore me," the voice continued. "I'm on your flight." My pulse spiked. Flight. There were no flights. "You're supposed to check tickets, right?" it said. "That's part of the job." "That's not my job," I whispered, barely audible. A pause, then a soft chuckle. "Close enough." The shadows shifted slightly. I could see the outline of feet now. Too still. Too perfectly placed. "Just open the door," it said. "I won't come in. I just need directions." Rule 5. If camera 12 turns on, leave the operations room immediately and lock the door behind you. Not helpful. Wrong situation. My eyes darted to the monitors again. Everything still looked normal. Except, camera 12 flickered. Once, twice, then turned on. My heart stopped. The runway was visible again. Empty. Completely empty. No figure. No movement. Just a long stretch of asphalt under dim lights. "Leave the operations room immediately," I whispered. My body didn't move. "Lock the door behind you." The voice outside laughed softly. "Don't do that," it said. "Stay where you are." My hands clenched. The rule, or the voice? Which one mattered more? "You're overthinking this." The shadow leaned closer to the door. "You've already seen worse tonight." That was true. That was the problem. I stood up slowly. My legs felt unsteady. The monitors flickered again. Camera 12 stayed on, waiting. "Good," the voice said softly. "That's right." I took a step toward the door, then stopped. "No," I said. The word came out stronger than I expected. The voice didn't respond immediately. "Rules," I whispered to myself. "Follow the rules exactly." Camera 12. That was the trigger. Not the voice. Not the shadow. The camera. I turned away from the door, walked to it anyway, but for a different reason. I grabbed the handle, unlocked it, pulled it open just enough to step out, then immediately turned back and locked it behind me. The hallway was empty. No person, no shadow, no sound. Just flickering lights and a long stretch of tile leading into darkness. I stood there, heart pounding. "Okay," I said quietly. "Okay." The operations room door was locked. Camera 12 was active. I had followed the rule. Behind me, from inside the room, something tapped against the glass of the monitors. Once, twice, 3 times. The hallway felt colder than it should have. Not the kind of cold you get from air conditioning or a draft. This was sharper, thinner, like the air itself had less substance to it. I stood there for a few seconds, staring down the empty corridor, trying to decide what part of the situation was worse. Being inside the operations room with something now clearly in there with the monitors, or being out here, exposed, alone. A faint buzzing overhead snapped me out of it. The lights. They flickered in uneven intervals, casting the hallway into brief pulses of brightness, followed by dull, gray dimness. Each flicker stretched the shadows along the walls, making them look longer than they should be. I glanced back at the door. Still closed. Still locked. Whatever had tapped on the monitors was now sealed inside. "That's good," I said under my breath. But the words didn't feel true. Because the rules never said what happened after you followed them. Only that you should. A distant sound echoed through the hallway. Metal shifting. Slow. Heavy. It came from deeper inside the airport, somewhere past the bend in the corridor where the lights didn't quite reach. I swallowed. "Don't explore," I muttered. "That's not part of the job." But standing still didn't feel like an option either. My eyes moved to a small security camera, mounted in the corner of the ceiling. It pointed down toward the hallway. Toward me. For a second, I felt an overwhelming urge to wave at it, to signal, to make sure someone, anyone, was watching. I didn't, because something about the angle of the camera felt off. Too low, too direct. Like it wasn't just recording, like it was focused on me. I stepped away from its line of sight. The metal sound came again, closer now, dragging, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. My chest tightened. "That's not in the rules," I whispered. And that was becoming a problem. More and more things were happening that weren't covered, which meant one of two things. Either the rules weren't complete, or they weren't meant to save me from everything. A soft chime echoed from somewhere behind me. I turned. It came from the terminal, the main area, the gates. Something had triggered one of the boarding alerts. "That's impossible," I said. There were no flights, no passengers, no reason for that sound to play. Another chime followed, then another. Then the overhead speakers crackled to life. "Now boarding." The voice was distorted, stretched, like it was being pulled through something before reaching the speakers. "Flight 702. The number glitched slightly, repeating over itself. "Final call." A slow, creeping dread crawl up my spine. Flight 702 wasn't on the schedule. It hadn't been all night. And yet, the announcement continued. "Passengers, proceed to Gate A2. My stomach dropped. Gate A2. I turned toward the direction of the terminal, my feet already moving before I fully realized it. "Don't go," I said quietly. "You don't have to go." But the rules, Rule 3 had already triggered once, and now the gate was being called again. If something was happening there, was I supposed to ignore it or observe? The distinction suddenly felt very important. I reached the end of the hallway and stepped into the main terminal. The difference was immediate. The space felt wrong. Not empty. Occupied. The air was thicker, heavier, like walking into a room where people had been talking just moments ago, but now weren't. The lights above Gate A2 flickered, then went out. Complete darkness. My breath caught. "Again," I whispered. "Rule 3. Exactly 10 seconds. I turned my head away from the gate immediately, focusing on the far wall instead. 1, 2, 3. The boarding announcement continued behind me. "Final call. Final call." 4, 5. Footsteps echoed across the terminal. Multiple this time. Not one person. Several. Moving quickly. 6, 7. The sound of rolling luggage followed, wheels clattering over tile. 8, 9. A low murmur of voices filled the space, whispering, layered, too many to count. 10. I turned back. The lights at Gate A2 were on again, and the gate was full. People sat in every chair, stood along the walls, clustered near the boarding line. Dozens of them, maybe more. My heart pounded in my chest. "They weren't there before," I said. "I know they weren't." None of them moved. None of them spoke. But they were all facing the same direction, toward the boarding door, waiting. The overhead screen above the gate flickered. Flight 702, boarding destination. The destination field glitched, filling with static before going blank again. Rule 4. Never make eye contact with passengers who are not listed on the flight schedule. My breathing slowed. Careful. Controlled. "Don't look at them," I whispered. "Just observe." But even without looking directly, I could feel it. Their attention, not on the gate, not on the door, on me. A subtle shift passed through the crowd, heads turning slightly. Not all at once, one at a time. like a wave, until they were all facing me. I looked down immediately. "Don't engage," I said under my breath. "Don't engage." The boarding chime sounded again, sharper this time, more urgent. Final boarding call for Flight 702. No one moved. No one stood. No one approached the gate. They just stood there, watching, waiting. A single voice broke through the silence. "Are you coming?" It came from somewhere within the crowd. Calm, clear, too clear. I didn't look. "Board now." Another voice, different tone. Same direction. "You're late." A third, closer. "You don't want to miss it." My chest tightened. They were talking to me. "Not my flight," I said quietly. "Not my job." A pause. Then, all at once, every voice spoke together. "Yes, it is." The sound hit like pressure, like the air itself pushing against me. I took a step back, then another. The crowd didn't move, but something else did. From the corner of my vision near the boarding door, a figure stepped forward, slow, deliberate. I kept my eyes down, but I could see enough. Uniform, airport staff, standing just inside the gate entrance, facing me. "Ticket," it said. The voice was flat, empty. I shook my head. "Not boarding." "Ticket." It took a step closer. I stepped back again. Rule 4. Don't make eye contact. That was the only thing keeping me grounded right now. "Ticket." Close for now. Too close. I can see its shoes. Polished. Perfect. Not a single mark. "Ticket." The word came out sharper this time, more demanding. I turned. Walked away. Fast. Not running. Not panicking. Just moving. The voices behind me rose in volume. Layered. Overlapping. "You're leaving? Why are you leaving? You have to board. You're supposed to board." The chime sounded again. Louder. More distorted. I didn't stop. Didn't look back. Didn't acknowledge any of it. I reached the hallway and stepped back inside, the noise cutting off abruptly behind me, like a door had slammed shut. Silence. Thick. Heavy. I leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "That wasn't real," I said. "That wasn't real." But it had felt real. Too real. After a few seconds, I pushed myself upright. The operations room door was still there. Closed. Locked. Waiting. I approached it slowly, reaching for the handle. From the other side, something moved. Not tapping this time. Not knocking. Just shifting. Like whatever was inside had been waiting for me to come back. My hand stopped inches from the door, and for the first time since the shift started, I hesitated. I stood there, staring at the door, my hand hovering just short of the handle. Every instinct told me to wait, to listen, to make sure whatever had gotten inside earlier was gone. But the rules didn't say to wait. They didn't say to check. They didn't say to hesitate. They said, follow them exactly. And I had. Camera 12 turned on. I left the room, locked the door behind me. That was it. No condition about returning. No warning about what might be inside afterward. Which meant either it was safe now, or it never had been. I swallowed and reached forward. My fingers wrapped around the handle. Cold. Colder than the air in the hallway. I turned it slowly. The lock clicked. Loud. Too loud. For a second, I thought something on the other side would react. Move. Rush the door. It didn't. The handle turned fully. I pushed the door open. The operations room looked exactly the same. Monitors glowing. Desk untouched. Chair slightly angled from when I left it. No movement. No sound. No sign that anything had been there at all. I stepped inside cautiously, my eyes scanning every corner. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." I shut the door behind me and locked it again immediately. That felt important, even if the rules didn't say it. I moved back to the desk, keeping my gaze on the monitors. Everything looked normal again. Gate A2, empty. Parking lot, car still there. Runways, clear. Camera 12, off. Just a black square again. I let out a slow breath. Good, I said. That's good. But it wasn't relief. Not really. Because I was starting to understand something. Normal didn't mean safe here. Normal just meant it wasn't your turn yet. I sat down slowly. The chair creaked under my weight, the sound louder than it should have been. For a moment, I just watched the screens, waiting, counting the seconds between nothing happening, trying to convince myself the worst was over. It wasn't. At 1:12 a.m., the radio lit up again. A sharp burst of static filled the room, making me flinch. Then, a voice. Clear, direct. Operations. I froze. Rule 8. If the radio asks you a question, do not answer unless you are certain who is speaking. My throat tightened. The voice sounded normal, professional, like Halverson, but not exactly. Operations, respond. I didn't move, didn't speak. Come in. The radio crackled softly. Waiting. My eyes drifted to the door, then back to the radio. Don't answer, I whispered. Don't answer. A pause. Then, Jake. My heart skipped. The voice changed slightly. Softer. More familiar. Jake. It's Halverson. I clenched my jaw. No, it's not. Another pause. Then a small sigh came through the speaker. You're doing fine, the voice said. Just need a status check. That was exactly what a supervisor would say. Exactly how they'd say it. Just confirm everything's clear. My hand twitched slightly. I wanted to respond. It felt wrong not to. That's how jobs worked. You checked in, you reported, you followed instructions. Except, these weren't normal instructions, and that wasn't a normal rule. Say something, the voice urged. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Harder. The word echoed in my head, like I was the problem, like I was overreacting. I leaned back in the chair, forcing myself to stay still. No, I said quietly. I'm following the rules. Silence. Then, the voice changed. Not gradually, instantly, from calm and controlled to something sharper, thinner. You think that's going to help you? My stomach dropped. The tone was wrong now, completely wrong. You think the rules are for you? Static crackled around the words, distorting them slightly. They're not for you. The radio hissed loudly. They're for us. A high-pitched screech burst through the speaker, forcing me to cover one ear. Then, silence. The radio went dead. The light turned off. I sat there, breathing hard, staring at it. Okay, I whispered. Okay. That was the first time something had directly pushed back. Not just tested the rules, but questioned them, tried to break them. Which meant it knew the rules too. My eyes moved slowly to the monitors again. Everything still looked normal. Too normal. At 1:25 a.m., the parking lot camera flickered. I focused on it immediately. The car was still there, same position, same angle. But now, the driver's side door was open. I leaned in slightly. I didn't see that open, I said. I would have seen that. The interior was dark. No movement, no visible person. Just an open door, waiting. I checked the other camera angle again. Same thing. Door open. No one around. A cold feeling settled in my chest. That's not right. I reached for the pen again. 1:25 a.m. Vehicle door open. No visible occupant. As I wrote, something moved. Inside the car. Just a shift. Subtle. Like someone leaning forward from the driver's seat. My grip tightened on the pen. No, I whispered. A figure slowly emerged, climbing out of the car. Tall, unsteady. Its movements were wrong, too delayed, like it was following instructions it didn't fully understand. It stood upright beside the open door, then turned, facing the terminal, facing the camera. My chest tightened. Not again. It started walking, slow, deliberate, across the parking lot, toward the building, toward me, each step slightly off, like it wasn't used to gravity, or the ground, or its own body. I watched it cross under the lights. For a second I saw its face, and immediately wished I hadn't. It looked incomplete, like features had been placed where they should be, but not finished. Eyes too wide, mouth slightly open, skin stretched just a little too tight. My stomach turned. "Rule 4, I said quickly. Don't make eye contact. I looked away from the screen. Too late. I'd already seen it. The image burned into my mind, the way it had looked directly into the camera, like it knew I was watching. A sound echoed from the hallway, a distant door opening. My heart dropped. It's not. Another pause. Then, a soft laugh. You're learning. The handle turned again, this time harder, more force. The door rattled slightly in its frame. Let me in. I shook my head, even though it couldn't see me. No. The voice softened again, almost patient. You won't last the whole night in there. My eyes flicked to the clock. 1:32 a.m. Still so much time left. You'll need help eventually. The words settled into the room like a promise, not a threat. That made it worse. I said nothing, did nothing, just sat there, waiting. After a few seconds, the pressure on the handle stopped. The footsteps retreated, slowly, back down the hallway. I didn't move for a long time, just listened, until the sound faded completely. Then, I looked back at the monitors. The parking lot was empty. The car was gone. For a while after that, nothing happened. And somehow, that was worse than everything that came before. Because now I knew what nothing really meant. It meant waiting. It meant something else was coming. The clock read 1:47 a.m., 13 minutes until 2. I didn't like that number anymore. I didn't like any of them. Every rule had a time attached to it, whether it said so directly or not. Midnight, 2 a.m., specific moments where things shifted, where the airport stopped pretending to be normal. I leaned back in the chair slowly, keeping my eyes moving across the monitors. Stay ahead of it, I whispered. Don't react. Anticipate. But how do you anticipate something that doesn't follow logic? My gaze drifted to the rules again. Rule 1. Do not acknowledge any aircraft that appears on runway B between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. That was next. Whatever happened on runway B, it hadn't even started yet. And everything before this already felt like too much. At 1:59 a.m., every screen dimmed slightly. Not off, not flickering, just dimmer. Like something had lowered the brightness of the entire building. My chest tightened. Here we go, I whispered. The clock clicked. 2 a.m. Camera 12 turned on. Not a flicker, not a glitch. Instant, clear. Runway B filled the screen in sharp black and white. And this time, it wasn't empty. A plane sat in the middle of the runway, completely still. No landing lights, no markings I could recognize. Just a long, dark shape with wings that seemed slightly too wide for its body. My stomach dropped. No aircraft, I said quickly. Do not acknowledge. The words felt important, like saying them out loud anchored them somehow. The plane didn't move, didn't make a sound. It just sat there, waiting. The radio lit up again, static. Then unidentified aircraft on runway B, please confirm. My hands clenched. No. Do not answer. The voice came again, more insistent. Operations, confirm visual. I shook my head. No. The plane's door opened, slowly. A dark gap forming along its side. My chest tightened. Don't look, I whispered, but I couldn't stop. Something moved inside, shifting in the darkness. Then, a figure stepped out. Tall, thin, familiar. Too familiar. It stood at the edge of the plane, looking toward the terminal, toward me. Then another stepped out, and another. One by one they emerged. Not passengers, not people, shapes. Wearing something like human forms, but not holding them correctly. Too many limbs bending the wrong way, heads turning too far. They lined up along the runway, facing forward, waiting. The radio crackled louder. Confirm number of passengers. My jaw tightened. Do not acknowledge. One of the figures moved, stepping forward, then another, then all of them, walking in unison, toward the terminal, toward me. The lights inside the airport flickered. The hum grew louder, deeper, like the building itself was reacting. You see them? The radio said. Not a question this time, a statement. You have to report it. No, I said firmly, I don't. The figures reached the edge of the runway, stopped, all at once, perfect synchronization. Then, every single one of them turned their heads, directly toward the camera. My breath caught. Why feed? I could feel it. They knew. They're waiting for you, the voice said. Just say it. My hands shook. Say what you see. The figures took one step forward, off the runway, onto the edge of the terminal grounds. Just acknowledge it. No. My voice came out louder this time. Stronger. I'm not part of this. The radio screeched. Angry. Sharp. You already are. The monitors flickered violently, every screen distorting at once, except camera 12. That one stayed perfectly clear. The figures were closer now, too close, just beyond the glass of the terminal, standing in the darkness, watching, waiting. I squeezed my eyes shut. Don't engage, don't acknowledge, don't respond. The words repeated in my head like a rhythm, like a shield. The radio went silent. The hum faded. The flickering stopped. Slowly, I opened my eyes. The monitors returned to normal. Camera 12, off. The runway, empty. No plane, no figures, nothing. I exhaled shakily, my whole body trembling. The clock read 3:01 a.m. I had made it through, at least that part. The rest of the shift passed in fragments. Nothing as direct, nothing as overwhelming, just small things. Movements in reflections. Sounds that didn't belong. Shadows that lingered a little too long. But nothing that broke the rules. Nothing that forced a choice. At 5:58 a.m., the first real light of morning started to creep through the edges of the windows. Gray, weak, but real. The monitors felt different, lighter, less oppressive, like whatever had been pressing against the building all night was finally pulling back. At exactly 6 a.m., the door opened. I turned sharply. A young guy stepped in, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Morning," he said casually. "You must be the new night guy." His voice was normal, completely normal. I stared at him for a second. "Yeah," I said finally. He glanced at the monitors. "Quiet night?" I let out a short laugh. It didn't sound right. Something like that. I stood up slowly, grabbing my things. My hands were still shaking. He didn't seem to notice. Or maybe he did. Maybe he just didn't care. "Anything I should know?" he asked. I looked at the rules sheet, still sitting on the desk, unchanged. I hesitated. Then, "Follow the rules," I said. He smirked slightly. "Yeah, they tell everyone that." "No," I said, more firmly. "Follow them exactly." Something in my tone must have landed, because his expression shifted slightly. "All right," he said. "Got it." I nodded once, then walked out. The hallway felt different now. Warmer, normal, like it had always been. Outside, the morning air hit me like a reset. Cold, fresh, real. I didn't stop walking until I reached the parking lot, until the building was behind me, until I could breathe without feeling like something was listening. I never went back. A week later, I saw the job listing again. Same pay, same description, same final line, must follow instructions exactly. I stared at it for a long time, then closed the page, because now I understood something most people wouldn't. Those rules weren't there to protect the airport. They were there to protect you, and only if you listened. Because the moment you don't, you stop being the one watching and become part of what's being watched.